The thermometer read -42 degrees Celsius when Lieutenant Mikhail Surkov pressed his eye against the scope for what he thought would be the last time. His fingers, wrapped in strips of torn undershirt beneath his mittens, had lost all feeling 3 hours ago. The Finnish snow had turned crimson in patches around his position. Some of it his own blood, from the shrapnel wound in his side that he'd stuffed with moss and bark. December 1939. The Winter War had been raging for only 2 weeks, but it felt like a lifetime. The Soviet 44th Rifle Division, over 12,000 men strong, had been ordered to cut through the Rati Road and link up with other units to encircle the Finnish forces. It should have been simple. It should have been over in days. But nobody had told the Finns. Mikhail had been separated from his unit during an ambush 3 days prior. The Finns had hit them at dawn, materializing from the white forest like phantoms, their white camouflage making them invisible until it was too late. Ski troops moving faster than any man should be able to move, appearing and disappearing like ghosts. In the chaos, Mikhail had taken a piece of exploding timber to his ribs and tumbled down a ravine. When he'd crawled back up, his unit was gone dead, captured, or scattered. He never found out which. Now alone in a hastily dug position behind a fallen pine tree, Mikhail watched through his scope as the impossible unfolded before him. The entire 44th Division, what remained of it, was trapped, strung out along the frozen road like beads on a string. The Soviet columns had been carved into isolated pockets by Finnish ski troops. Supply trucks burned, tanks sat immobilized, their crews frozen inside or picked off when they tried to escape. And at the head of this nightmare, blocking the only road forward, was a single Finnish machine gun nest. But it wasn't the machine gun that terrified the Soviet soldiers. It was him, the ghost. Mikhail had been watching for 6 hours now, counting. Every Soviet officer who tried to organize a push forward dropped before the order left his lips. Every soldier who manned the heavy weapons, the mortars, the anti-tank rifles, the machine guns, that could have suppressed that Finnish position, fell with a single shot. The ghost never missed, not once. Through his scope, Mikhail watched another lieutenant stand up, map in hand, gesturing to his men. The shot came before Mikhail even heard it. A distant crack that barely registered over the wind. The lieutenant's head snapped back, and he crumpled into the snow. 73. Mikhail had counted 73 confirmed kills in 6 hours. One man, holding back an entire battalion. Impossible, Mikhail whispered, his breath crystallizing instantly. But the evidence was spread across a kilometer of frozen road. Bodies in the snow. Officers, sergeants, specialists, anyone who looked like they knew what they were doing. The ghost was systematically decapitating the Soviet command structure. As darkness began to fall, Mikhail made a decision that would haunt him forever. He was a sniper, too, one of the best in his division before it was destroyed. He knew the angles, the distances, the wind calculations. And unlike the hundreds of terrified Soviet soldiers pinned down on that road, Mikhail was in an elevated position to the side. He had the angle the ghost wouldn't expect. He had seen where the shots were coming from. A small rise, maybe 400 meters away, covered in snow-laden pines. The ghost was up there somewhere, and Mikhail was going to find him. It took him 40 minutes to crawl through the snow, dragging his rifle, ignoring the fire in his side where the wound had reopened. Twice he had to stop as Finnish ski patrols passed nearby, their white-clad figures gliding through the trees like spirits. But he made it. The position was masterful, a natural hide with perfect sight lines to the road. And there, nestled behind a fallen log with pine branches arranged for concealment, was the ghost. Mikhail's blood froze colder than the Finnish winter. The sniper was a boy, maybe 17, maybe younger, with a face as smooth as fresh snow and eyes that held the weight of ancient ice. His rifle was a standard Finnish M28. Nothing special, no scope, just iron sights. Beside him, in the snow, lay a pile of empty shell casings that glinted in the fading light. The boy hadn't noticed Mikhail yet. He was focused on the road, tracking another target. Mikhail watched as the boy's finger tightened on the trigger. Steady as stone despite the cold that would make any normal person shake uncontrollably. The rifle kicked. 400 meters away, another Soviet soldier fell. 74. Don't move, Mikhail said in Russian. His rifle aimed at the boy's head. The Finnish sniper froze. Slowly, carefully, he turned his head. When their eyes met, Mikhail saw something he would never forget. Not fear, not hatred, but a profound, terrible sadness. The boy looked at him with eyes that had seen too much death. Eyes that belonged to an old man trapped in a young body. "You speak Russian?" Mikhail asked, his voice barely above a whisper. The boy nodded once. "How many?" The boy's lips moved, but no sound came out at first. Then, in heavily accented Russian, "I stopped counting at 100. Mikhail's hands began to shake. 100 men. In less than a day, a boy with a rifle and iron sights, holding back an entire battalion. "They killed my family," the boy said, his voice hollow. "Burned my farm. My mother, my father, my 2 little sisters. They killed them when you invaded, so now I kill you. Every day. Until there are none of you left. Or until one of you kills me." The sound of engines rumbled from the road. The Soviets were finally organizing, using the darkness to make a push. Without officers to lead them, they were just throwing men forward in waves, hoping numbers would be enough. The boy looked at Mikhail, then at his rifle, then back at the road. "You're going to shoot me now?" Mikhail's finger trembled on the trigger. He thought of his own orders, his own commanders, the invasion that had seemed so necessary just weeks ago. He thought of the 12,000 men of the 44th Division, most of them now dead or dying in the Finnish snow because nobody had expected this kind of resistance. He thought of the boy's family, burning. "No," Mikhail said, lowering his rifle. "I'm going to help you." The boy's eyes widened in shock. "But first," Mikhail continued, pulling out his binoculars and scanning the tree line, "you need to move. They'll have triangulated your position by now. And there," he pointed to a dark shape moving through the trees. "Finnish ski patrol coming. They're going to think you're a Soviet sniper." For a moment, neither of them moved. 2 snipers, enemies by nation, united by the insanity of what they'd witnessed. Then the boy nodded, grabbed his rifle and his remaining ammunition, and together they vanished into the darkening forest as the sounds of the Soviet push echoed through the frozen air behind them. What happened next would become legend, whispered around campfires and written in classified military reports. But the truth was far stranger than any myth and far more terrible. They moved through the forest like shadows, the boy leading with the confidence of someone who knew every tree, every frozen stream, every hidden trail. Mikhail struggled to keep up, his wounded side screaming with each step, his boots designed for Moscow winters, not Finnish hellscapes breaking through the snow crust with every stride. Behind them, the night erupted. The Soviet push had begun. Flares lit the sky like dying stars, and the rattle of machine gun fire echoed through the pines. Screams carried on the wind. Russian screams, Finnish screams, screams in the universal language of death. "Here," the boy said, dropping into a depression hidden beneath an overhanging rock. It was barely large enough for 2 men, but it was invisible from above and sheltered from the wind. More importantly, it had a clear view of a secondary road Mikhail hadn't even known existed. "What's your name?" Mikhail asked, his teeth chattering. "Arne," the boy replied. "Arne Virtanen." "Mikhail Surkov, Lieutenant. Or I was, before my unit died." Arne pulled out a piece of dried meat from his pack and handed half to Mikhail. It was tough as leather and tasted like smoke, but it was food. "You said you'd help me. Why?" Mikhail chewed slowly, buying time to find the words. "Because I've been watching you for 6 hours and I realized something. You're not just killing soldiers. You're killing the war itself." Arne's eyes narrowed. "What do you mean? Without officers, Without specialists to run the heavy weapons, that entire division is paralyzed. One sniper you holding back 12,000 men, but it's not sustainable. Eventually they'll organize. Eventually they'll overrun your position with sheer numbers, and then they'll continue the invasion, and more people like your family will die. So what are you suggesting? Mikhail pulled out his map, smoothing it against the frozen ground. I know their tactics. I know their formations, their command structure, their weaknesses. You know this terrain. Together, we don't just hold them, we destroy them. Arnie stared at the map, then at Mikhail. You're a traitor. Yes, the single word hung in the frozen air between them. No excuses, no justifications. Just the simple truth. They'll execute you if they catch you, Orrin said. They'll execute me anyway. I'm a deserter now. And besides, Mikhail gestured to the carnage visible in the distance. I watched what's happening out there. Your country didn't ask for this war. My country brought it to your doorstep, burned your farms, killed your families. I can't undo that. But maybe I can stop it from getting worse. For a long moment, Arn said nothing. Then he pulled out a small photograph from inside his coat. 4 faces smiled at the camera. A father with kind eyes, a mother with flour on her apron, 2 little girls with matching braids. Behind them, a red farmhouse with white trim. This was taken 3 months ago, Arne whispered. At harvest time, we were happy. Mikhail looked at the photograph and saw his own betrayal reflected in those innocent faces. I'm sorry. Sorry doesn't bring them back. Arn tucked the photo away. But maybe it can stop someone else from losing theirs. Show me your plan. Over the next hour, huddled in that frozen hide, they created something unprecedented in military history. A 2-man guerrilla campaign designed to systematically dismantle an entire division. The key is the supply column, Mikhail explained, pointing to the map. They're already cut off, already freezing. We hit their ammunition trucks first, then fuel, then food. We make them choose between freezing and advancing, and either choice kills them. The machine gun nests here and here will provide covering fire for their retreat, Arn noted, his finger tracing the Finnish positions. We eliminate those gunners. And your own troops can advance. Mikhail nodded. But we have to be smart. We target only specific soldiers. Officers, yes. But also the veterans, the ones who keep morale up, the ones other soldiers listen to, break their spirit along with their command structure. It was brutal. It was calculated. It was murder on an industrial scale, planned with the precision of a military operation. And it worked. Over the next 3 days, Mikhail and Arn became something out of a nightmare. They would separate before dawn, taking positions on opposite sides of the trapped Soviet division. When Mikhail spotted an officer, he would fire a single shot into the air, a signal. Arn would take the kill shot from his position, making it impossible to triangulate. When Finnish patrols got too close to Mikhail, Arnie would create a distraction on the other side of the line. But it was the psychological warfare that truly broke the Soviets. On the second day, Mikhail used his knowledge of Russian military protocols to forge orders. He wrote them on paper, taken from dead officers, and left them in places where Soviet soldiers would find them contradictory orders, confusing orders, orders that sent units marching into Finnish ambushes. Arnie, meanwhile, began taking trophies, not from the dead that would have been understandable. Instead, he took personal items from soldiers while they slept. A watch here, a letter from home there, a photograph, a wedding ring. He would leave them arranged in deliberate patterns in the snow where morning patrols would find them. The message was clear. We can reach you any time. You're not safe, even when you sleep. By the 3rd day, the Soviet 44th Division was destroying itself. Friendly fire incidents increased. Soldiers shot at shadows. Officers who tried to restore order were immediately targeted, sometimes by Mikhail and Arn, sometimes by their own panicking troops who thought anyone giving orders must be leading them into a trap. It's working, Arn whispered on the 3rd night, his voice hollow. They had returned to their shared hide, both exhausted, both haunted, The division is falling apart. Yes, Mikhail agreed. But there was no triumph in his voice. They had killed directly and indirectly over 300 men in 3 days. The frozen road was a graveyard, littered with bodies that wouldn't be buried until spring thaw. Soviet soldiers huddled around, failing fires, their ammunition expended, their food gone, their hope extinguished. "I've become a monster," Arnie said suddenly. "My father was a farmer. He grew wheat. He never hurt anyone. And now I'm Ver." He gestured helplessly at the carnage below. "We're both monsters," Mikhail said. "But sometimes monsters are necessary to fight a greater evil." "Are they?" Arnie turned to look at him, and in the boy's eyes, Mikhail saw something breaking. "Or do we just tell ourselves that so we can sleep at night?" Before Mikhail could answer, a sound cut through the darkness. Not gunfire, not explosions, something worse. Singing. From the Soviet positions, a chorus of voices rose into the frozen night. They were singing Katyusha, a folk song about a woman waiting for her soldier to return from war. The voices were weak, trembling with cold and fear, but they sang together. Hundreds of dying men, singing about home. Arn's rifle fell from his trembling hands. "They're just boys, like me. They didn't choose this war either." Mikhail felt something crack inside his chest. "No, they didn't. What have we done?" Before Mikhail could respond, a new sound joined the singing. Engines, heavy engines, growing louder. Mikhail grabbed his binoculars and looked down at the road. His blood turned to ice. Soviet reinforcements, a fresh battalion, with tanks. And leading them, clearly visible in the moonlight, was a flag Mikhail recognized, the banner of the NKVD, Stalin's secret police. They weren't coming to rescue the 44th Division. They were coming to execute them for cowardice. "God help us," Mikhail whispered. "It's about to get much worse." The NKVD battalion arrived at dawn, and with them came a silence more terrifying than any gunfire. The trapped soldiers of the 44th Division stood at attention, their faces gray with cold and fear, as officers in pristine uniforms stepped from warm trucks and began reading from prepared documents. From their hide 300 meters away, Mikhail and Arnie watched through their scopes, unable to look away from the horror unfolding below. "What are they doing?" Arn whispered. Mikhail's jaw clenched. "They're selecting men for execution. Officers who failed in their duty, soldiers who showed cowardice in the face of the enemy. It's what the NKVD does. They don't reinforce defeated units, they make examples of them." As they watched, NKVD soldiers began pulling men from the ranks. A captain who had tried to organize a retreat, a sergeant who had told his men to conserve ammunition, a young private who had cried for his mother in the night. One by one, they were dragged to a clearing beside the frozen road. "They're going to shoot their own men," Arn said, his voice cracking. "Because of what we did." The first volley echoed across the forest. 20 Soviet soldiers fell into a mass grave. They'd been forced to dig themselves. The remaining troops were ordered to watch, to learn what happened to failures. Mikhail felt bile rise in his throat. "This isn't war. This is murder, and we caused it." Arn turned to look at him, tears freezing on his cheeks. "We broke them so badly that their own commanders think they're traitors. Those men down there, they died because we turned their battalion into chaos." "No." Mikhail grabbed Arne's shoulder. "They died because Stalin sent them to invade your country, and because the NKVD are butchers who kill their own soldiers to maintain fear. We didn't create this system, we just exposed it." But even as he said it, Mikhail knew the words were hollow. Responsibility was a web, and they were caught in it. The NKVD commander, a colonel named Volkov, according to the insignia visible through Mikhail's scope, stepped forward to address the survivors. His voice carried on the frozen air, sharp and clear. "Comrades, you have failed the motherland. You allowed yourselves to be stopped by peasant farmers with hunting rifles. You cowered before the enemy like dogs. Mikhail watched the faces of the surviving soldiers. No anger, no defiance, only exhaustion and terror. "But I am a merciful man," Volkov continued. "I will give you a chance to redeem yourselves. Today, you will advance. You will break through the finish lines. You will show them the might of the Soviet Union. And those who show courage," he paused dramatically, "will be allowed to live." A second grave was being dug. This one, larger, much larger. Anyone who retreats, who hesitates, who shows any sign of cowardice, will join their comrades in the pit. "We advance at noon. Glory to Stalin." The soldiers repeated the phrase, their voices dead. Arn was shaking, his finger hovering over his trigger. "I can kill him." The colonel. "One shot." "No," Mikhail said quickly. "You kill him, they execute 50 more men as punishment. The NKVD doesn't negotiate, they only escalate." "Then what do we do? Let them execute more people? Let them force those men to charge into Finnish guns?" Mikhail's mind raced. They had created this situation with their guerrilla warfare. They had broken the 44th Division so thoroughly that it had attracted the attention of Stalin's executioners. Now men were dying not in battle, but in murder dressed as discipline. And in 3 hours, hundreds more would die either shot by their own commanders for retreating or killed by Finnish defenders when they were forced to advance. "We give them a third option," Mikhail said slowly, an idea forming. "We give them a way out." "What are you talking about?" Mikhail pulled out his map, his mind working through the implications. "Look at the terrain. The NKVD are positioned here, behind the main Soviet line. They're watching their own troops, ready to shoot anyone who runs. The Finnish machine gun positions are here and here, covering the road. But there's a gap." He pointed to a narrow valley between two ridges. "Right here. It's steep, heavily wooded, and it leads east, away from both armies. You want them to desert. I want to give them the choice. They can charge the Finnish lines and die. They can retreat and be executed by the NKVD. Or they can run into that valley and try to survive." Ernie stared at the map, then at Mikhail. "That valley leads into 70 kilometers of frozen wilderness. No supplies, no shelter. Most of them would die anyway. Most, not all. It's a chance, which is more than they have now." "And how do you propose we tell them about this option? Write them a letter?" Mikhail smiled grimly. "Something like that." Over the next 2 hours, they worked with desperate speed. Mikhail used his remaining paper and a pencil to write messages in Russian, explaining the escape route and the timing. He signed them not with his name, but with a symbol, the Orthodox cross his grandmother had worn, something Russian soldiers would recognize, something that would seem like a message from God rather than from traitors. Aaron, meanwhile, used his intimate knowledge of the terrain to sneak closer to the Soviet positions. He moved like a ghost, the skill that had earned him his reputation, and placed Mikhail's messages where soldiers on guard duty would find them, in ammunition boxes, tucked into officers' tents, wrapped around frozen ration cans. By 11 o'clock, the messages were distributed. By 11:30, they had returned to their position to wait. "Will they believe it?" Arn asked. "Some will. Maybe enough." At noon, Colonel Volkov gave the order to advance. The remnants of the 44th Division, perhaps 2,000 men now, out of an original 12,000, began moving forward in ragged lines. Behind them, NKVD soldiers watched with rifles ready. The Finnish machine guns opened fire. Men fell. The Soviet advance faltered. "Forward!" Volkov screamed. "Forward or die." And then something unexpected happened. A sergeant, a big man with a thick beard, suddenly veered left, running for the valley. Then another soldier followed. Then 5 more. Then 20. "The traitors are fleeing!" An NKVD officer shouted. "Fire! Fire!" But the deserters were already disappearing into the valley, and the NKVD couldn't shoot them all without turning their backs on the main force. More men followed, seeing their chance. In moments, the organized advance had turned into chaos. Some men charging forward, some being shot by the NKVD, and over 300 running for the valley escape route. "They're doing it," Arn breathed. "They're running." But Mikhail was watching something else. Colonel Volkov had turned his attention from the battle to the fleeing soldiers. He was screaming orders, directing his NKVD troops to pursue into the valley. "He's going to hunt them down," Mikhail said. "He can't let mass desertion succeed. It would undermine everything the NKVD stands for." Arn's eyes hardened. "Then we stop him. If we kill NKVD officers, there's no going back. They'll hunt us to the ends of the earth." "Mikhail." Arn's voice was steady now, all doubt gone. "Those men down there are running because we gave them hope. If Volkov catches them, he'll execute them all. We can't save everyone, but we can save them." Mikhail looked through his scope at Colonel Volkov, barking orders, organizing the pursuit. A monster in human form, sent by a monstrous system. "You take the officers on the left," Mikhail said. "I'll take the right. When I fire, you fire. We eliminate the leadership, and the pursuit falls apart." They settled into position. Two snipers, former enemies, now united against a greater evil. Mikhail's crosshairs centered on Volkov's chest. His finger found the trigger. He thought of his grandmother's cross, the one he'd drawn on the messages. She had always told him that God forgave those who protected the innocent. He hoped she was right. "On my mark," Mikhail whispered. 3, 2, 1. Both rifles fired simultaneously. Colonel Volkov dropped, a look of surprise frozen on his face. Around him, his officers fell like puppets with cut strings. The NKVD soldiers, suddenly leaderless, stopped in confusion. In that moment of chaos, the deserters vanished into the valley. But the shots had revealed Mikhail and Arne's position. Within seconds, gunfire erupted around them. Bullets chewing into trees and snow. "Run!" Mikhail shouted. They fled through the forest, pursued by the enraged NKVD. Behind them, the battle for the Rate Road continued, but Mikhail and Erne were no longer part of it. They had become something else, hunted men, with the full weight of the Soviet secret police now dedicated to their destruction. As they ran, Arne grabbed Mikhail's arm. "The valley where the soldiers escaped. We should head there. Safety in numbers." "No," Mikhail panted. "We'd lead the NKVD right to them. We run the opposite direction. We give them time. But that leads deeper into Soviet territory. We'll be surrounded." Mikhail managed a grim smile. "Then I guess we better be very good at hiding." They plunged deeper into the forest, 2 men against an army, carrying the weight of hundreds of lives saved and hundreds more lost, running toward an uncertain fate with certain death behind them. And somewhere in that frozen wasteland, 300 Soviet soldiers stumbled through the snow, following a cross drawn by a traitor, hoping to find redemption in the wilderness. 3 days. That's how long they lasted before the NKVD caught up with them. Mikhail and Arne had done everything right. They'd moved only at night, covered their tracks, avoided all settlements, survived on melted snow, and the last of Arne's dried meat. But the NKVD were professionals, and they had something Mikhail and Arne didn't: unlimited manpower. The trap closed on the 4th morning. In a small clearing surrounded by dense forest, 50 NKVD soldiers, armed and angry, emerging from the trees in a perfect encirclement. "Drop your weapons," a voice commanded in Russian. Mikhail and Arne stood back to back, rifles raised, knowing it was over. Even if they killed a dozen men, they'd be overwhelmed in seconds. "Tell them we want to negotiate," Arne whispered in Finnish. "They don't negotiate. They execute. Then we die fighting." Mikhail's finger tightened on the trigger. But before he could fire, a different voice cut through the frozen air. "Comrade Lieutenant Surkov?" Mikhail froze. That voice. He knew that voice. From the ring of soldiers stepped a man Mikhail recognized immediately. Captain Dmitry Petrov, an intelligence officer from his old division. They'd shared a tent, shared stories. Dmitry? Mikhail lowered his rifle slightly. You're alive? Barely. I was away from the unit during the ambush. When I got back, everyone was dead. Dmitry's face was haggard, his eyes haunted. Except you. You're the only survivor. And now I find you here with a Finnish sniper, having just murdered Colonel Volkov of the NKVD. Dmitry, listen to me. No, you listen. Dmitry's voice cracked. Do you have any idea what you've done? You killed an NKVD colonel. They've put a bounty on your head that would feed a village for a year. They're calling you the White Traitor, a deserter who joined the enemy. I am a deserter. I did join the enemy. The admission hung in the frozen air. Around them, NKVD soldiers shifted nervously, fingers on triggers. Dmitry stepped closer, his voice dropping. Why, Mikhail? Why would you throw everything away? Your career? Your life? Your country? Mikhail glanced at Arn, then back at his old friend. Because I watched a boy with a rifle hold back 12,000 men. I watched the NKVD execute soldiers for the crime of being afraid. I watched this war up close, Dmitry, and I saw what we really are. We're not liberators. We're not heroes. We're invaders who burn farms and kill families, and when we fail, we kill each other. That's treason. That's truth. Dmitry's hand went to his pistol. I should execute you right now. You should. You probably will. But first, tell me something those soldiers who deserted into the valley 3 days ago. Did the NKVD catch them? A flicker of emotion crossed Dmitry's face. Some. Most got away. How many? 217 men, last count. They scattered into the wilderness. Some probably froze. Others probably made it to neutral Sweden. We'll never find them all. Mikhail smiled despite the guns pointed at him. 217 lives. That's why I did it. You're insane. You saved 200 men and damned yourself and everyone who knows you. My career is finished because I didn't stop you. My family will be investigated. My name is Dirt. I'm sorry, old friend. Sorry? Dmitry laughed bitterly. You're sorry? Let me tell you what happened after you betrayed us, Mikhail. The Finnish forces, emboldened by the collapse of the 44th Division, launched a counteroffensive. They destroyed 3 more divisions, thousands dead, all because you broke our lines. The words hit Mikhail like bullets. He hadn't thought about the strategic implications, only the immediate moral ones. Arnie spoke for the first time in halting Russian. Your commanders broke the lines, sending men to die in an unjust war. We only exposed the cracks already there. A child, Dmitry said, finally looking at Arn. This is who you threw your life away for? A Finnish child? This child, Mikhail said quietly, has seen more death than most generals. His family was burned alive by our troops. He watched it happen. And yet when I offered him help instead of bullets, he took it. He's braver than both of us. Dmitry's hand trembled on his pistol. Around them, the NKVD soldiers waited for orders. I can't let you go, Dmitry finally said. You know that, right? Even if I wanted to, the NKVD would execute me for it. I know. And the boy? He's a prisoner of war. He gets the same rights as any captured soldier. Dmitry laughed again, harsh and broken. Rights? Mikhail. He killed over 200 Soviet soldiers. He's not getting rights. He's getting a noose. Arne's hand found Mikhail's. The boy's fingers were ice cold but steady. In that touch, Mikhail felt a lifetime of understanding pass between them. One request, Mikhail said, before you do whatever you're going to do. What? Oh, let me tell you why it was worth it. For the next 10 minutes, standing in that frozen clearing with 50 guns trained on them, Mikhail told Dmitry everything. The ghost holding back the battalion. The psychological warfare. The NKVD executions. The desperate gambit to give soldiers a chance to escape. And through it all, he told him about Arn not as an enemy, but as a person. A farmer's son who loved his family, who never wanted to be a soldier, who had been transformed into a killing machine by circumstances beyond his control. When he finished, tears were frozen on Dimitri's cheeks. "You're asking me to believe in something bigger than the motherland," Dimitri whispered. "I'm asking you to believe in mercy." The silence stretched. Around them, the forest held its breath. Then Dimitri did something that would cost him everything. He holstered his pistol. "There's a path," he said quietly, in Finnish that surprised both Mikhail and Arn. "Through the trees, heading northwest. It leads to a frozen lake. On the other side is neutral territory. Swedish border patrol sometimes crosses there. Dimitri, the NKVD are going to find you anyway. When they do, I'll say you overpowered me. I'll say I was ambushed. They won't believe me, but it buys you time." He looked at his old friend. "You taught me something today, Mikhail. You taught me that sometimes the bravest thing a soldier can do is refuse to fire. They'll execute you for this, probably. But I'll die knowing I didn't murder a child who'd already lost everything. That's worth something." Dimitri turned to the NKVD soldiers surrounding them. "Prepare to take the prisoners. First, we search the area for accomplices. Split into groups of 5. Search pattern Delta. Move out." As the soldiers began to disperse, Dimitri turned back to Mikhail and Arn. "You have maybe 10 minutes before they realize what's happening. Run. And Mikhail, if you make it to Sweden, tell them what happened here. Tell them the truth about this war." "I will. I promise." "Then go, before I change my mind." They ran through the forest toward the lake, with the sounds of confusion beginning to rise behind them. Mikhail's wounded side screamed with every step, but Arn pulled him forward, the boy's strength surprising for someone so young. They reached the frozen lake just as shouts erupted from the forest behind them. The ice stretched before them like a white desert, a kilometer of exposure with nowhere to hide. "We'll never make it across before they see us," Arn said. "Then we don't cross. We go around, through the marsh there. It's slower, but it has cover." They veered left, plunging into the frozen marsh. Behind them, gunfire erupted, not at them, but into the air. A signal. The NKVD had discovered Dimitri's deception. It took them 3 hours to circle the lake. 3 hours of crawling through frozen reeds, of hiding when patrols passed too close, of fighting exhaustion and hypothermia. But finally, impossibly, they saw it. A Swedish border marker, a simple wooden post with a painted flag. They crawled the last 50 meters and collapsed on the Swedish side. Gasping, trembling, alive. "We made it," Aaron whispered. "We actually made it." Mikhail looked back across the frozen wasteland they'd crossed. Somewhere back there, Dimitri was probably being interrogated, possibly tortured, certainly facing execution for his mercy. Somewhere back there, 217 Soviet soldiers were scattered across the wilderness, trying to survive. Somewhere back there, the war continued to grind forward, consuming lives without meaning. "No," Mikhail said quietly. "We survived. That's not the same as making it." They were found by Swedish border guards 2 hours later, 2 half-frozen men, one Russian and one Finnish, who should have been enemies but sat huddled together for warmth like brothers. The guards brought them to a refugee camp, where they were questioned, fed, and given warm beds. In the days that followed, Mikhail kept his promise to Dimitri. He told Swedish journalists everything about the ghost who held back a battalion, about the NKVD executions, about the 200 men who chose freedom over orders. The story spread. It reached newspapers in London, Paris, New York. It became propaganda for some, inspiration for others. But for Mikhail and Arni, it was simply the truth. The Winter War ended 3 months later. Finland survived, though at terrible cost. The Soviet Union eventually won territory, but lost its reputation as an invincible force. And in the classified files of the NKVD, a memo appeared recommending the execution of one Captain Dmitry Petrov for treason. The execution order was never carried out. Dmitry had vanished, his name struck from all records, his existence erased. Some said he died in prison. Others claimed he escaped to join the disappeared men he'd helped save. Mikhail never found out which was true. After the war, Arnie rebuilt his family's farm. He married, had children, and never picked up a rifle again. He lived to be 83 years old, and on his deathbed, he held the faded photograph of his murdered family and whispered one word: redemption. Mikhail stayed in Sweden for the rest of his life, teaching school and writing about the war. He never returned to Russia, knowing execution awaited him there. But every year, on December 1st, the day he met Arn, he would light a candle for the 217 men who chose to run, for Dmitry who chose mercy, and for all the soldiers who died in wars they never wanted to fight. The official Soviet records never mentioned the ghost of Rate Road. They never acknowledged the battalion stopped by a single sniper, the NKVD colonel killed by a traitor, or the mass desertion that exposed the cracks in Stalin's army. But the veterans knew. They whispered the story in quiet moments, when officers weren't listening. They told their children and grandchildren about the sniper who stopped a battalion, not with bullets alone, but with something more powerful. The simple truth that soldiers are human beings first, and following orders second. And sometimes, late at night in refugee camps and veterans' hospitals across Europe, old men would raise a glass to the two snipers who became brothers, to the captain who chose conscience over country, and to the idea that even in the darkest moments of war, mercy is possible. The snow still falls on the Rate Road every winter, covering the old scars, burying the memories. But the story remains, passed down through generations, a reminder that one person with courage can stop a battalion, that mercy is stronger than fear, and that even in the frozen heart of war, humanity can survive. This is the story of the sniper who stopped a battalion. This is the story of what it cost and why it mattered. And this is the truth that no government, no army, and no ideology can ever erase. That in the end, we are all just people trying to survive. And sometimes the bravest thing we can do is help each other do exactly that.